I think it's been a year since I've been looking at you through the live lens, and we wanted to give things a test to see if lives can come back on. We were wrestling with some local internet tech issues. So hopefully everything is going well. We've got my tech expert and sweetie of my life, Michael, behind the cameras. We've got Rob running the channel management chat thread, and the three of us are so glad to be here today. We're taking today to answer your baking questions. And so I already see people like Anna Maria are starting to ask questions already. So I'm going to get, I know the chat's going to start moving. I'm going to get to as many as I can over the course of about half an hour, 40 minutes. But let's not waste any time. I've even pulled some of the most common questions that you leave on the video threads, because yes, we do look at them. And so let me tackle first a very good question that deals with altitude, because I believe, Anna Maria, you're in Colombia, adjusting baking formulas to deal with altitude. You're specifically looking to adjust baking powder in your New York style cookie. And if you're an avid baker and you follow chocolate chip cookies, that is the Levain bakery style. That's kind of a thicker, taller chocolate chip cookie, a little different from the typical one. And I'm going to touch on chocolate chip cookies a little later on. But the general rule, let's talk about altitude in general. The issue when you're baking at altitude is you've got lower air pressure, so less resistance. And what that means when you're baking is whatever you put in the oven, if it's going to rise up, it's going to rise up faster. But because recipes are often designed at sea level, the timing of how those ingredients, how your eggs are setting, your sugar is melting and then reincorporating into setting your cakes, or yeast rising to set your breads, all of a sudden goes out of whack because things rise up faster. And you may find if you take a sea level recipe, bake it, what happens? You pull it out of the oven, it collapses, or it doesn't rise enough in the first place. It rises up and sinks within the oven. So the three major things you can do, and this applies, number one applies to your chocolate chip cookie recipe, lower your leavening. And for every 1,000 meters, I lower about 15%. So you're looking at baking powder in such a small measurement, you want to take it down probably for 2,600 meters, at least by half. That will help. Item number two is you can increase your liquid. So by adding a little extra milk, fruit puree, whatever it is that is not fat-based liquid, add a little extra. Again, I go with the 15% for every 1,000 meters model. That gives your other ingredients time, because it's more fluid, to do that combination thing so things lift and hold. And then the second thing you want to do is increase your oven temperature. And that can be by 10 degrees Celsius, 25 Fahrenheit. You got to keep an eye on things. But what you're essentially wanting to do is get everything lifting and setting faster, so you're not competing with that lower air pressure that will sink your baked goods. So I hope that gives you a good starting point for both your specific recipe and altitude baking in general. That's a great question. I did see another question come in, Liette, about avoiding dairy and gluten-free, avoiding chocolate, acid reflux. Ugh, it can be, I was going to say pain in the neck. It can be literally a pain in the neck. And so the question is there any way to make a maple lava cake? I think you could design one. I have a recipe on the channel that is a peanut butter lava cake. So it's a basic sugar cake cookie shell with a liquid filling. So I would go to that recipe and look to make your dairy-free adaptations to it. The egg, it would adapt not so effectively if you're going full vegan, because the egg gives the recipe some structure. But I think that would give you a good starting point to play, and then let me know what results you might have. So now I'm going to take a little peek, because the chats are just rolling along right here. It's great to see you here. Hello in Mexico and Guadalupe. And Grimsby, which is just down the street. Assuming that's Grimsby, Ontario, not Grimsby in England. Yes, because you're talking about Niagara-on-the-Lake. You're local. We've got someone from Denver. Oh, so those altitude tips will definitely work for you, Shree. Which rack? Let's talk about ovens, because I've seen a couple notes come through about the ovens. Which rack to use when you're baking in your oven? So for things, you want to think about where you want the color in your baked good. So when you want your color of your baked good to be equally around, say a basic banana bread, anything baked in a square pan with even browning, that will go on the middle rack. And the principle is you've got even heat distribution circling around the oven. And we're going to talk about convection in a second because that relates. That was another question that came through. I use the lower rack when I want to promote browning of the bottom of something. So fruit pies are a textbook example, or blind baking a pie shell, because you want to promote that browning and setting on the bottom, but you don't want to overcook the top, because the heat source in most ovens, some come from the back, but most come from the bottom. Now, the top rack is when heat rises, so your degree in your oven could be just a couple degrees warmer on the top. So when you want to promote browning on the top, that's when you put your items on the top rack. Does the color of the pan make a difference when it comes to browning? Now, there are a lot of studies and video comparisons out there, and I have heard people claim that a dark metal pan promotes browning more than a light or lighter colored coated pan. Personally, and this is not based in science, but just on decades of baking experience, I find the weight of the pan, so a stainless steel pan versus an aluminum pan, stainless steel is going to promote browning more because it's heavier, it conducts heat faster and more effectively, but the recipe itself has more impact on the browning. The quantity of fat and sugar means something is going to brown faster. You may have to alter your oven temperature. So that's my general thinking. When I'm testing and I need to commit to an oven temperature and a bake time, it is based on really what's in the recipe itself more than the pan itself. So I hope that gives you a good starting point. There was a question that came in early on, and hello to everyone who is joining me on this Q&A baking live stream, convection baking. Now, every make of oven can be different. I will say when I create my recipes, it is based on a still oven with no fan, because that is an equal playing field for all of us. I don't know what brand oven you have. It might differ from mine, but that is the level playing field. And when you're baking recipes like that have a custard or very fluid base that you don't want to over souffle in the oven, so a cheesecake, a crème brulee, a baked custard, you want the still oven feature. A lot of contemporary ovens have a convection bake fan, and what that means is it's the lowest fan setting. So it slowly moves the air around the oven. And then you've got your convection roast function, or your regular convection oven, and that's a faster blowing of the hot air within the oven. And all that it's doing is amplifying the ambient temperature of your oven, so it promotes more browning on the surface of things. This can be risky when you're baking a cake with a lot of volume. A bundt style cake, an angel food cake, anything that's got a lot of batter, it can overcook the outside before the inside has fully set. So that's where you want the low convection. And let's be honest, an air fry oven is simply that. It's super amplifying the air in a small amount of space, which is why it's used to crisp up things. So generally, the lower fan is the preferred option. A lot of contemporary ovens have the automatic temperature setting. So if the recipe calls for 350, if you set it on convection 8, put in 350, and I'm speaking in Fahrenheit, it will automatically adapt, digitally adapt to the temperature and lower the temperature. If you have an older oven where you don't have that feature, the general rule is 25 degrees Fahrenheit or 10 degrees less. So if the recipe calls for 350 Fahrenheit, lower it, or that would be 180 Celsius, lower it to 325 or 160, actually, 20 degrees, my mistake, not 10 degrees, to make that difference, so the heat of the convection balances with the oven temperature. And there it is. Greetings from Mexico with that exact convection oven question. So I'm ahead of the curve here. Oh, there we go. A good question from Ashley. And this is actually on when I pulled the most common question list. This came up. So let's tackle, if a recipe gives a weight and a volume, but the weight is different than the standard weight, is it better to give in? So we're talking weights versus volumes. And Ashley finds a discrepancy with the flour. And that is very, very common. So first, let's talk about weights versus volumes. So depending where you live, you may be comfortable measuring recipes by volume because that's the way your mom did it, and it's most common. Measuring by weight, I use metric weight here in Canada, and a lot of the world uses metric weight. It's what you learn in cooking school because it's precise and consistent. And that too is a question I get, the inconsistency in recipes. If you start switching to weight, you'll find you get more consistency. Now, the discrepancy you see quite often in recipes, and this tends to be country to country, typically. You'll see a different weight, a volume to weight conversion of flour is the prime example, where in the US, it may be listed at around 125 to 130 grams for 1 cup of flour. In Canada, in the UK, it's 150. And I've been asked so much, and I will be honest, when I'm creating recipes and when I give recipes, I have a team of recipe testers. When I give them recipes, we still, even to this day, decades later, still test volume to weight, weight to volume. And I cannot for the life of me get Canadian flour to weigh 125 grams to make 1 cup. It is always 150, 147 to 150. It does not vary. And what that's telling us is mill to mill, country to country, our flour is milled differently. It's got a different milling type. It's graded differently. If you look at flours in Europe, we've all heard of 00 flour in Italian. Their flours are graded and milled differently. Flour in France has a grittier texture to it. So you have to, essentially what I'm trying to say is you look at the country of origin. That will tell you how to then adapt your flour to your own recipes. Now, I'm just going to pull back I have to go back to I just lost my feed here, so I'm going to go back and open it up again. Sorry about this. I think I had my pop-out chat open for so long. There, now I'm back. Here we go. Okay, opening up the thread again. Thank you for everyone's kind words and greetings and letting me know where you're from. We've got good results and a chocolate vanilla marble cake in a ceramic dish. Actually, that brings up a good question I get asked about. So I was talking about the color of baking surfaces and its impact on recipes. The actual material of the vessel can have a dramatic impact. So metal pans for cakes, baking trays is the most common. Those are the easiest to predict because they heat up quickly and they cool down quickly. Glass is handy for a pie plate because while it takes a little time to heat up, it really holds the heat at the critical moment. So when you're making something like a fruit pie with a softer filling, your glass is setting that pie pastry at the base so that the liquids from the fruit filling won't seep through. So that's why I like a glass pie plate. I also like the fact that you can see through it, so you can see when your pastry crust is actually browning and close to being done. Ceramic takes longer to heat up and conversely takes longer to cool down. So it is ideal for recipes like crisps and crumbles where the bottom layer of the pastry is less consequential. But if you were to use it for, say, a pie pastry, you may find your pie pastry doesn't set as well, and it can hold the heat. Conversely, using a glass square pan for something delicate like lemon squares, because it holds the heat for so long, is at risk of overcooking the outside edge of your lemon square. If you've ever made a lemon square in a glass pan and you see it souffles around the edges and it's not quite as creamy, it's because of the pan, not you or the recipe itself. Oh, we've got people watching from Australia. We've got people watching from Colombia. Thank you, everyone, for your attention. In the UK, we've got everybody joining us because we're bakers, right? We share this love of baking. C. Shannon is asking if they should invest in a digital scale. I would say 100%. The precision, the ease, and I'll be honest, if you don't even need convincing that way, you'll have fewer dishes because you put the bowl on the scale, you hit tare, it sets it to 0, no math required. It doesn't even matter how you get that ingredient. None of this, like loosen the flour, scoop it in, level. Just get the flour into the bowl. A gram is a gram. Oh, we've got a question here about biscuits. Ranchera71 says, I made simple biscuits this morning, but they didn't really rise. They were flat and thick like a cookie. What could have happened? Now, this is, I think one of the points I'll bring out in answering this question is a question that made my top 10 list, and I've seen the question pop up. Oven troubles. That is the variable that as a recipe creator, I can't control, and it's so frustrating. And that's why you see in recipe instructions always a time variance. Bake for 25 to 30 minutes. Well, everything else is so precise. Why can't the bake time be that precise? Because our ovens vary so much. One of your issues with the biscuits, Ranchera71, might simply be the oven preheat time. And just because you set your oven and you click the button and it goes ding when it hits the temperature, doesn't mean your oven has hit the full ambient temperature of the oven, has reached that temperature. So it can take 7 to 10 minutes on a contemporary oven to preheat according to the manufacturer's timing. I always preheat my oven 15 to 20 minutes, and that makes a critical difference, especially something like a biscuit that takes a high temperature and a quick amount of time in the oven. That can be the difference. If your oven isn't preheated, those biscuits stay flat. Checking the expiry date on your baking powder. Baking soda doesn't always have an expiry date. I switch mine out every 3 months because it loses its oomph after a time. But I'm suspecting it's just simply, I'm hoping this answers your question. It might be a preheating issue. And I hope you'll give the recipe a try again. Okay, these questions are just rolling in. It's great to see so many people. And Anna Maria, there you are again. Oh, so you're in Bogota. Cool. My brother-in-law and his wife visited Colombia just in November. They thought it was beautiful. Thank you for your kind words and support here. I love that we're learning together, and know that I am always on a learning curve with you. I would never presume to think I know everything about baking. Oh, heavens. I should just retire if that's the point. There's always something to learn. You'll see new videos coming up on the channel. We are just putting together our next video, which is all about banana bread and looking at the one-to-one substitutions. So to create my original go-to banana bread and then making it gluten-free, making it vegan, making it gluten-free and vegan with one-to-one substitutions, and then we compare them side by side. So if you like that idea, please leave your comment below because we do pay attention to them, and we can do more of those style of videos. We've got the question of, should you stick with a hand mixer, but if you're baking a lot, would it getting a stand mixer be in order, even if you're only baking for yourself? It's The difference between, what I love is you can bake with a hand mixer and achieve any results equivalent to a stand mixer. The only difference is time. You're looking at a small motor in a hand mixer, so whipping egg whites, whipping cream, getting in there with batters tends to take longer than using a stand mixer. So that is really the sole decision, that and the obvious cost. I bake so much that the stand mixer is quick. I can wash the bowl, be back in the bowl with the right attachments. The attachment differences do make a difference, and that is part of the speed. We use the whip attachment for your fluffy batters, your whipped egg whites, use the paddle for cookie doughs and cream cakes, and then use the dough hook, where with electric beaters, it's that middle 4 looped beaters that kind of does all jobs. I've never found those dough hook attachments. There's not enough power in the motor. So I hope that helps guide your decision a little bit. And oh, we've got people watching from everywhere from Minnesota to the Philippines. I think it's absolutely fantastic. Oh, and Rocio Castillo is talking about baking my chocolate chip cookie recipe. So if I can just take a moment here. Wow, we've already gone through, it's 20 after 11 already. Whoa, we're just flying through the time. Okay, so this chocolate chip cookie recipe I want to talk about. I think you all know it because we are just 200,000 views shy of 20 million views for that recipe. Can you believe it? A real sort of feel-good moment for me was when Chef Steps actually used that recipe that you've watched, because it brought it to their attention, and worked it into their chart of top 10 recipes. And just earlier this week, they took, including mine, and averaged out the top 10 recipes for chocolate chip cookies to create their own chocolate chip cookie recipe. So I'm proud to be one of those candidates to be considered in that average. But I welcome you to check out the video, make it, and we plan on doing something special when we hit 20 million views. So keep your eye on the channel. Keep watching the video, hit it on repeat, and then we'll get to that little celebration faster. Oh, we've got more love for the chocolate chip cookies. This is great. And what I'm doing right now, along that lines, I am doing the test to make them, to test the recipe gluten-free and to test the same recipe vegan, 1-to-1 again. So maybe that'll be an upcoming video, a side-by-side, so it's to see how you can attach them. Purple Shadows, good question. Can a glass dish be used to bake bread? It can. It depends on the bread recipe and the glass. So you're using a tempered glass dish, I certainly hope, that is oven proof. The issue can be a lot of yeast breads call for a really high oven temperature, upwards of 400 degrees Fahrenheit, 200 degrees Celsius plus, and sometimes the temperature threshold of that glass dish can't handle the heat and it might risk cracking. But if you're baking something that is an enriched bread that's got eggs and butter in, a challah style bread, a cinnamon bun style bread, then you'd be fine in a glass dish because that's usually a slightly lower temperature. So while okay, yes, you got to watch your oven temperature. Another great question. Oh, here we go. A question from Goldilocks. How do I make your no-bake cheesecake into lemon flavor? Tried adding the juice, but it didn't set. And that is a very good question, Goldilocks, because the no-bake cheesecake is relying on acidity to set it. But if you add too much liquid, you're interfering with that ratio of what is actually setting because of the acidity and now simply adding too much liquid. So the key to turn it into a more lemony flavor is actually not the juice. The juice is there for tang, is to add lemon zest. The lemon zest, if you were to add just the zest of one whole lemon, finely grated, adding it early on as you're creaming your cream cheese to soften it with the sugar, it'll draw out the oils from the lemon zest. It'll give you that full lemon flavor. It won't give you the tanginess, but you've got your crème fraîche or sour cream to kind of step in and fake that lemon flavor, then what I would recommend is if you were to make something like a simple lemon curd and then spread that on top of the cake. That would give you that, because lemon curd is cooked and it gives you that tart, tangy lemon flavor that would build the lemon flavor. So you actually would get, oh, I think we're on to something here, Goldilocks. A beautiful lemon tart top, and then put some fresh berries on it, and then you get that creamy, soft, but full-bodied lemon flavored cheesecake underneath. Okay, we might be working on that. That sounds like a good spring recipe to work on. Oh, and hello from Laval, Quebec. Nice to see you watching. Okay, and we're talking about, Be Kind is talking about khachapuri dough. So I have a khachapuri, that Georgian boat-shaped bread recipe, and it turned out kind of sticky and hard to handle. Depending where you're cooking from, we were talking about earlier how flour is milled and can behave differently. And when it comes to yeast breads, and I haven't even done the dive into sourdough with you, have I? That's a different topic for a different day. Humidity and temperature, and your initial water temperature can greatly impact the consistency of your bread. And so right now here in Southern Ontario, which you're watching this live right now. If you're watching it on repeat, we've been told that this is going to be the coldest place on the planet today. Yay! What that means though is our air is so dry that I tend to have to either reduce my flour or increase my liquid if I'm making a yeast dough. Conversely, if it's in the middle of August and it's humid, or you're in a location that is very humid, you may find your dough is very sticky. So that's why typically with yeast doughs, there is a little wiggle room. If you need to add a little extra flour to make it easier to handle, you always start with the recipe, but then you have that room to wiggle room. So I'd say try again, keep practicing, because as bakers, when it comes to baking, the first time you try a recipe, you're just getting to know it. You're building each other's trust. Do I trust this recipe? Do you trust me to make it well? And you have to kind of go through those steps. And then once you make it and you realize, hey, I think I'm onto something, the second time you make it, isn't it just so much better? And that is why when you go to cooking school, a pastry program is usually longer than a cooking program, because you need that repetition. You need that practice to understand what's behind baking. These questions and notes you're making are fantastic. We've got, can I use a toaster oven for recipes requiring a water bath like a cheesecake as a substitute for a regular oven? You can, definitely. Thank you for that question. But be wary that just because the cubic foot space of a toaster oven is so much smaller than a conventional oven, that your temperature, don't be opening and closing that oven a lot, and keep an eye on it, because it might, you don't have the air motion, but it should work just fine with a water bath if you've got the right scale that fits in the oven. The water bath function when it comes to baking custards and anything that needs a gentle egg cooking is it's providing a hot, insulated environment. So that dry air is aggressive, and that's why you can overcook the outside of something custardy like a cheesecake before the inside is set. And the water bath creates a buffer so it cooks more gently and more evenly. Great question. Oh, Carlene, I was on the QEW going to Hamilton yesterday. I don't know if you saw me on CH Morning Live. I do the morning news shows locally here now and again. Ooh, Carlene made Icelandic brown bread. Yeah, Michael's giving you the thumbs up there. And pita bread last night. Oh, it's bread baking season. I'm so glad you like the recipes. I see there's not a question in there, but here we are. This is what we're doing in weather like this. We are baking. I've got a full weekend of baking. I was supposed to have friends come down. We were going to somewhere else for dinner, but this weather this weekend is so terrible that I am going to spend the whole weekend inside recipe testing and baking. We've got a question from Brunei. Some recipes call for sour cream, like my devil's food cake. Yes, which you just made. Good work there. What is the best substitution for sour cream for cheesecakes ganache? That is a great question, and I have seen that because depending where you live, you may not. Sour cream is Common in North America, common in Europe, Eastern Europe, not available everywhere. Greek yogurt, I think, is pretty universal now. That is your best substitution. If you can at least make sure you have a little fat in your Greek yogurt, I think 2%, 4%, sometimes you can even find 9%. That way it replicates the fat content of sour cream, but it gives you that set, because Greek yogurt has that set to it, is your best substitution, 1-to-1, and I don't think you have to make any other adjustments. It might have a slightly tangier taste. There's a creaminess that you get from sour cream, but baked into a recipe, something like the devil's food cake, you have so much else going on, it should work just fine. Great question. I'm gonna take a moment and have a sip of tea here. Wow, we're at 11:30, so I think I'll go for another 5-10 minutes. Your questions are fantastic. This is so great, we're able to connect again. Another comment you can leave in the chat thread, do you want to see me go back to live baking? We had stopped not because we weren't enjoying it, but we were simply dealing with internet issues. This time of day seems to work very well for us here, so if we bring it back, let us know if that is something that interests you. And now, Ted, a reverse question. Can you use crème fraîche instead of yogurt? Well, that is reverse engineering the question of what can you use in place of sour cream, and my answer would be yes. I love my high-fat dairy, so crème fraîche in any situation is a good one. Whether you make it yourself or you buy it. A good quality will make the difference, but yes, I'm behind that. Okay. Pecan pie success. Oh, okay. We've got someone who's having trouble with croissant. Good for you for making croissant. I tend to mess up during fermentation or, we're scrolling so quickly, actual baking. I don't know what the issue is. They come out flat. It could, now this is a tough one to tackle without more detail. So if you're listening, you've got letters and numbers, so I can't address you by name. But you're having croissant issues come out flat. That could be in the rolling and folding process. So you make your base dough and then you make your barrage and you put it in. And as you're rolling and folding, what I find is quite often if you're rolling, because unlike puff pastry, which the base dough can be a little more dense, a croissant dough is lighter because it's got the yeast in it, is to actually let the butter soften up slightly. So if you've got the dough chilling in the fridge, pull it out about 15-20 minutes. So when you're rolling it, you get less cracking and shattering of the butter as you're rolling and stretching it, so it comes out more in an even sheet. And it's that lamination, the repeated folding, that builds the flakiness in addition to the yeast. So that would be my one tip. If your fridge is really cold, it could actually be working against you. And I find when it comes to making croissants at home, the thing we tend to do is underproof our croissants. So if you don't give them enough time for that, because that yeast was in the fridge, to really wake up, the butter, once they've been shaped, will soften. If you've ever baked your croissants and you pull them out of the oven and they look small, but you've got a pool of butter on your baking tray, that is a sign of underproofed croissants. So you really have to give them their time. And again, if it's cold, it's wintry, even if the instructions say 90 minutes to 2 hours, if you have to let them go longer, because yeast is a living thing, it's going to actually tell you when it's ready to go in the oven. I hope that gives you a couple of guiding tips. Actually, Greg asked a great question on this note of laminated doughs. I do make my traditional formula of puff pastry here on the channel, but would I consider doing a rough puff pastry? I would be happy to, because honestly, as much as the classic roll and fold puff pastry delivers a great result, a good rough puff is fantastic and totally doable. And when I first started making puff pastry, when I was pastry chef at a restaurant here in Niagara, rough puff was the only way I knew how to do it, because I didn't have the fancy sheeter to do the folding. So I had to find, it's actually simpler, it's a little easier, but you do get a consistent result. So I am going to make a note of that. Thank you, Greg, for that. Thank you again for your kind words of support here. Oh, we've got a question from Node0077 about a career change, transitioning from whatever you do into the baking industry. It's, I think this is a great question to wrap up on, because in the spirit of baking, for a lot of us, if baking is your hobby, it's your way to relax, it's your calming, it's your light at the end of a busy week. I have a friend who is very frustrated with her work right now. Baking is what gives her solace and gets her through the week. You have to do you. And if you're so, and I will admit, I'm a second career baker. I studied political science in university. I went into banking for a few years early in my career. And for me, cooking and baking was my form of relaxation. It was throughout my youth. That. And so I did do that switch where I call it my muffin epiphany. I was up at 2 in the morning making banana muffins because it was the only thing that would relax me. And in that moment, it was like, this is what I have to do. I had worked in restaurants a little bit before as a server, so I kind of understood what would be involved. And I made the switch. That said, was it difficult? Yes. It's, especially if you're making a career switch from a midlife or a successful career job. So you have to be aware of the financial consequences of quitting and going to cooking school if that's the path you wish to take. But there's so many more options now for education, for pursuit. If you have never worked in a bakery or a restaurant or a catering company, it's a good idea to go and offer to work for a day, to do a stage and just say, can I offer my services? I want to see what this industry is like. And you may discover it just hooks you like it did me and draws you right in, and you get hooked on that energy and the adrenaline and the deliveries. And there's nothing like a Saturday night when it's busy and you've got a wedding cake on the go and you've got desserts to plate and there's just such great energy. It can also be absolutely terrifying, overwhelming, and take the joy out of baking. For some people, that is what happens. So make sure you give yourself that time to really evaluate. That said, in the baking world, there's such a great option now for starting your own business from home. You have to follow your local public health standards in terms of certifying yourself in your kitchen in order to bake from home and sell. So I leave that to you. But that's a great way to sort of gateway yourself into a baking career. You can keep it as a hobby, but still profit from it. And that brings up, before we wrap it up, I love seeing all your notes, and I'm going to go through the chats because I'm talking to you here. I'm not always reading. I want to read these questions you were asking me. I'll spend time to do that, make time for another cup of tea to do that. But someone very early on in the beginning of the thread asked about costing recipes, which is a very good conversation. And if you're interested, I can do a deeper dive with a Q&A, come back with a live on how to cost out a recipe. Because if you are making that leap into a baking business, whether from home or commercially, or just looking to budget your baking, you need to allocate a budget to it. And look at the price of chocolate these days. It changes your budgets. Learning how to cost a recipe. You do it by weight, so you have to use your metric weight volume, and you can calculate just with simple division and the portions, but the portion size cost or the cost of, first you calculate the cost of the recipe as a whole. There are plenty of spreadsheets out there that can help you do that, and you just plant in the recipe into the spreadsheet, and you can plug in your local, where you purchase your ingredient costs, and the spreadsheet will do the math for you, and then you divide it by the portion size. But it really helps illuminate, especially if you're getting into the business. You may be known for your best brownies ever, but then when you realize that you're charging $3 for a brownie, but it's costing you $3.25 to make it, That is not a profitable brownie as much as people love it. And don't forget to pay yourself too. You got to work that into it. So these have been, the questions are still rolling in. I see lots of love and support. Michael's moving around behind the cameras here. The rough puff, I think we're gonna have to do a recipe for that. So we're gonna put that on the list. Oh yes, and okay, so see Shannon, it was you who wrote the question. Yes, and you do have to factor in the cost of your equipment at the same time. Now we're starting into an accounting discussion that is amortization. So you don't work the cost of that piece of equipment into a single recipe, but you look at your bigger picture of how much you're making in a year, say, and how much you're spending. And then over the course of 5 years, that equipment cost is highest at purchase time, but then it trickles down and gets amortized and spread out essentially over the time you bake. But that is an important factor. Labor, food cost, and equipment. And energy. Turning on the oven costs money. You factor that into it too. Okay, I know I said I'd sign off, but we've got a last question here about pumpkin pies ending up with a soggy crust. Even with par baking, how can you solve it? I would say you want to par bake a little further. It really is. Or start your oven temperature when you put your pumpkin pie filling in after you've par baked your crust. Keep that oven temperature a little higher to get at least the base of that pumpkin custard cooking, you know, that kind of 1/2 inch around. Get that setting that will protect your crust. And then turn the oven temperature down to continue cooking to set the middle. It is the paradox of a pumpkin pie. You need the pie shell, which cooks at a high temperature, and you've got a delicate custard, which cooks at a low temperature. So splitting the difference should make it. You know what? I have to sign off. I have lots of conversations. You've given me lots of inspiration now for episodes moving over, and I want to hear if you want to see more of these live sessions, whether just Q&As or some live baking. It has been my pleasure. And if you're watching this live, it's Friday. Let's spend the weekend baking. You are amazing bakers. You are the best fans. You have been loyal for so long. I've been here on the channel so long, and I can't wait to keep delivering you delicious recipes, tried and tested, and we're on this baking journey together. Have a great weekend, everyone. Cheers. Oh, cake.